6 years ago, Sun Zeshun was toiling on his farm in China's coastal province of Jiangsu growing rice and wheat, earning about 19,800 yuan, $3,000, in a good year. He seemed doomed to a life of grinding poverty. An error has occurred. You have one free Business Week article left. Register for more. Register or sign in already a subscriber. Link your Bloomberg Terminal account or your Business Week subscription account to access all articles. Then in 2012, Sihong, a county of about 1 million people, launched a pilot project to test a new land reform policy. For the first time in the more than 60 years the Communist Party had ruled China, farmers were permitted to rent out their land, as long as it continued to be used for agriculture. Sun leased his to a commercial operation called Jiangsu Meiyang Ecological Farming and Forestry Company and got a job as a roofing contractor. His income almost doubled, to about 37,000 yuan a year, including the 7,000 yuan he earned in rent. 2 years ago he bought a new house and a 110,000 yuan Chang'an brand SUV. Life is much better than before, says Sun, chatting on a village street near his home. I have more freedom, and my income is less affected by the weather and other uncertainties. Almost 4 decades after Deng Xiaoping began reversing Mao Zedong's disastrous experiment in rural collectivization, large commercial farms are back in favor in China. Jiangsu Meiyang rents almost half the 988 acres it tends in Suanggu Township from farmers like Sun. Instead of wheat and rice, the owners grow sweet potatoes and sakura tree saplings. Earnings now average more than 800 yuan per mu, a unit of land equivalent to 0.165 acres, from about 500 yuan before, according to Suanggu Deputy Mayor Dan Quanglei. In November of last year, policymakers in Beijing approved a rollout of the land reform tested in Sihong to the rest of the country. The changes are part of a drive to boost China's agricultural output and turn its farmers into consumers, objectives that dovetail with the larger goal of curbing the economy's dependence on debt-fueled investment to support growth. China's unlocking the underlying wealth in these land assets, says Liang Hong, chief economist at China International Capital Corporation in Beijing, who previously worked for the International Monetary Fund. We're looking at 300 to 400 million people with more purchasing power, and that's the size of the European Union. Land in China belongs to the state, and farmers contract to use it without owning it. The 2007 property law established a uniform registration system for so-called land use rights. 2/3 of the country's arable land had been registered as of the end of last year, and the central government is aiming to have the task completed by the end of next year. Farmers can now rent out their land use rights and, in some parts of the country, can also use them as collateral for loans. Yet benefits for those like Sun are capped by prohibitions on leasing land to property developers and industrial enterprises, which would likely be willing to pay more for the acreage than agricultural cooperatives. Also, outright sales are still banned. Impetus for reform is coming from a combination of challenges China faces, says Fred Gale, a senior economist for China at the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Economic Research Service in Washington. One is to boost the country's food production and reduce reliance on imports, which more than tripled in the past decade to $110.6 billion last year. Improving the lot of China's subsistence farmers is also crucial to President Xi Jinping's pledge to reduce poverty. The average plot size per rural worker is about 1.2 acres in China, compared with 180 acres in the US and 385 acres in Australia, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. About 30% of the country's 230 million rural households had already transferred their land by the middle of last year under various pilot programs, Agriculture Minister Han Chengfu said late last year. The economic impact of this could be huge, says Lula Gong, China economist at Citigroup Incorporated in Hong Kong, who drew a comparison to former Premier Zhu Rongji's landmark decision in the late 1990s to allow city dwellers to buy homes. That created a real estate industry that, with related activities, contributes about a quarter of gross domestic product, estimates UBSAG. It's a de facto transfer of wealth to rural households that will boost consumption and help generate more small businesses, says Liu. Some of that wealth, though, is pocketed by officials rather than farmers. In China, rent income on arable land averages about 12% of annual farm income, compared with 40% globally, according to a survey by the China Household Finance Survey and Research Center at Chengdu's Southwestern University of Finance and Economics. Loren Brandt, a professor at the University of Toronto who is an expert on China's economy,